That is stupid. Listen. I have to say that I'm not. Okay, that doesn't bother me. It's like,
Shalom, Rabbi Papi.
Good morning, Yehudi. Yehudi, do you hear me?
Yeah, I hear you.
Okay, wait a minute. Sorry, I couldn't hear you. I realized I didn't have my volume turned up.
Good.
That's a bit of a problem. How are you doing today?
You know, it's Rosh Chodesh, so that's a pickup every single time. You know,
Okay.
Mar Cheshvan happens to be one of the 4 months that the Tanakh actually mentions by
Right.
name. No. And it is sort of cute that Parshas Noach almost always comes out around the beginning of Rosh Chodesh Mar Cheshvan. You know, obviously this is a coincidence because in the Eretz Yisrael system, it took 3 years to finish the Torah. So, but you know that Eretz Yisrael meant had 3 different haftarahs for Parashat Noah. One of them was a haftarah related to the Migdal Bavel. That was Sifanya, chapter 3. Because they have Kohamim, or I forget the phrase, achat, you know, and so that perfectly, in other words, that actually solves the problem of the what happened with the Migdal. You know, it was at that time it wasn't wanted, but in Messianic times it will be something to look forward to. You know, so it's really good to look at Yossi Ofer's list of. You know, we have about 75 haftarahs altogether. I really don't know. I have to check Fishbane, but it's something at that rate. But in Eretz Yisrael, I had like 150. So it is sort of a fun project to go see. Remember when we learned together for Parshat Shemot? It turned out the Teimani Haftarah had it better nailed than either one of the ones that the Ashkenazim and the Sfaradim used. But Fishbane didn't even address that. You know, it just like sailed right past him. And in fact, in general, he doesn't address the Haftarot that were in Eretz Yisrael. No. He has a chance to do another edition. Hi, Ricky. Shalom.
Hi.
Welcome back.
What do you say? Chodesh Tov?
Yep, exactly. Chodesh Tov to everyone. Hi, Rabbi Zucker.
Boker Tov. Chodesh Tov.
I hope all your Chagim went well.
They were very good.
Good.
You still got FIDF posters in your house?
Yeah.
Because I thought that they've gotten into some trouble. I mean, in terms of the way they handle their funds. You haven't been keeping up with this?
I haven't.
Oh, check it out. Yeah. You might want to take
they were, but I thought they were redoing their leadership, but then it seems some people are staying on.
Put this way, nobody's giving money to them anymore. Yeah. Okay, that's the fundamental thing that matters here. Like Rabbi Papi once gave a sermon that took a position on Black Lives Matter that was sort of neutral one way or the other. And I said, listen, that's fine as long as you don't give them any money. I said, because that giving them money means you're serious about supporting them.
Well,
just want to say in shul that they might be of some value in some way. Who knows how? That's fine. But if they're going to come to your door and ask you for money, forget it.
Well, that's also because that became corrupt because Black
Yeah,
Lives
well, that's
Matter
exactly
went
right.
from being
In other words, but like I say, anybody
yeah.
who saw what these people were up to weren't too surprised to find out what their end was. I mean, you start with illegitimate means and you usually end up with illegitimate fundraising.
But the problem is Black Lives Matter went from being a hashtag to everybody and their brother creating an organization, Black Lives Matter. And that here they created this Black Lives Matter Foundation. And so, everybody thinks they're giving to Black Lives Matter, but it turns out the people in the
Well, that's the same
the
thing.
foundation were skimming off the top.
That's what started this whole conversation.
Yeah.
When I saw the poster for FIDF at Rabbi Zucker's home, I said to myself, I wonder if Rabbi Zucker knows what's been going on with FIDF lately. Because if he did, I don't think he'd have that poster.
Well,
Yes, that's so true. But if you're donating money to Dakar, it is your responsibility.
Not to support somebody's.
I would say, if you're donating money to a cause, then you do have a responsibility to make sure that the money is handled expeditiously, and the cause itself is something that's the real deal. After all, money isn't not being going straight to the cause. It's going to some intermediary. You have to check the intermediary out. You just do. I mean,
I still like the poster, but I no more contributions. It's been a while anyway.
Yeah. There are many.
Magen David Adom is a lot more reliable. That's
a very, very important.
For
okay,
sure.
If you prefer giving to American charter outfits, that's a pretty solid one. I mean, just you have to look into them. That's just the point. Okay, let's get a flood of information from Rabbi Papa. Yeah, that's why we're here.
Yeah,
indeed,
literally a flood. Although we're going to be focusing just on a few words. First of all, the first word is Noach. We know what it means, but who is Noach? We're just going to take a look at some unusual characteristics of Noach that we don't necessarily get from the biblical text. So first of all, we have in last week's parasha the birth of Noach. Vayechi lemech 82 shana, me'at shana v'yoled ben. He lived 182 years, and he gave birth to a son. It doesn't just give the name automatically. He gives birth to a son. Vayikra et shmo Noach, and they called his name Noach, Lemor. And then an interesting trope on that word. You actually read the Tlisha, the Gershaim. Let me try this one more time. You read the Geresh first, and then the Tlisha Kana, the Gedolah, the reverse of the way it's written over the word. May this one comfort our sorrow, as they translate here. May it's von yadenu, from the pain of our hands. Min ha'adama asher erarah Adonai, that God, from the land which God had cursed. Of course, that was part of the curse of Adam. So we have the announcement of a birth. It stands out because Noach is the 10th in line from
Adam.
But now, so, okay, Noach is born, and already Lamech realizes that there's something special about him. We don't know why. Of course, we know why because we know the rest of the story. But Tanhuma, Midrash Tanhuma, has an interesting explanation of why this should be so. Or at least there are a couple of explanations. So who would like to read?
I can, Rabbi.
Okay, thank you.
Lamech lived 182 years and begot his son, through whom the world was to be reestablished. He called him Noah, saying, "This one will comfort us in our work and in the toil of our hand." How did he know that this one would comfort us in our work? Was Lamech a prophet?
Yeah, I
Well,
mean, Lamech is an unusual character, but we generally don't assign him the gift of prophecy. Go
Reb
ahead.
Shimon, son of Yehozadak,
Mm-hmm.
said that there was a tradition that when the Blessed Holy One told Adam, "Cursed be the ground for your sake, in toil shall you eat of it," Adam inquired, "Master of the universe, how long?" He replied, "Until a man-child already circumcised shall be born." When Noah was born circumcised, Lamech understood immediately that this was the one concerning whom the Blessed Holy One had said, "This one will comfort us in our work."
Okay, so right off the bat, how does Lamech know that this son is special?
He was circumcised.
Yeah, it was at birth. And how do we know he was circumcised at birth? Well, or at least let's see how the Midrash continues to explain it. Sorry, go
He
ahead.
was he was unblemished.
Because
This
later on, by the way, sorry, at the beginning of our parasha, it says, um, Noach ish tzaddik time. Why am I suddenly blanking on this?
Amim hayabedorot.
Time Doro. Yeah, he was
Not Doro, Dorotav.
Dorotav. Tamim, right?
Exactly the same thing.
Because that's the drash about in his generation he was good, but um, the word tamim, can mean many things. It can mean perfect. Certainly in referring to sacrifices, it means unblemished, whole. So hence, if he's described as tamim, what could that mean? Go ahead.
Born perfectly.
he was
Right.
he was unblemished.
Mm-hmm.
This suggests that he was one of the 7 men born circumcised. Adam and his son Seth were born circumcised, as it is written, "He begot a son in his own likeness after his image, and he called him Seth."
Yeah. So since Adam was born circumcised, which they're assuming, um, and there was no one to circumcise him, so that makes sense. And if he gave birth to a son who was exactly like him, well, then there we go.
Noah was born circumcised, as it is written, "He was unblemished in his generations." Jacob was born circumcised, for it is said, "And Jacob was Tom man."
Yeah, it says Ish Tam Yoshevo Halim. Probably there means simple man, dwelt in tents. He was not an active kind of guy. But they use the word Tom. So, once again, unblemished.
Joseph was born circumcised, for it is written, "These are the generations of Jacob." Joseph, because he resembled his father.
Yeah. So, we have this Elu Toldot Yaakov, Yosef. So immediately goes from Yaakov to Yosef. So, it must mean that he resembled his father. It's the juxtaposition. Of course, Toldot Yaakov Yosef
I have a
become.
question. I have a question. So,
Yeah.
what about Abraham? Abraham was not unblemished, I guess you would say.
Well,
No.
if he was born circumcised, we're going to have to dump an entire parak in the Torah, which
Yeah.
talks about how God commanded him to be circumcised.
Yes,
The
exactly.
whole Brit. So,
It's
it
just-
would sort of spoil the story if you get.
I know, but it just
This is drash, Shelley.
I
It's not
understand.
that at all. It's,
Yeah.
it's so far away from. I mean, the first thing you might want to ask to me from a shop point of view, what does Lamech see about this child that makes him make such a wish?
Right.
Now,
And so
when with Moshe, it says Vatero Toki Tofu, and it's
we'll
generally
get to him in a
understood
moment.
according to the pshat that it'll look healthy, robust. Chance that the kid will survive if you put him in a situation like
Okay.
baby basket floating in the Nile. You know, of course, the
Interesting.
Midrash says something completely different. The
Yeah.
Midrash says when Moshe was born, the entire house was full with light, pulling
Right.
from the word told by Elohim and
Yeah.
Torah told. You know,
And
so in other words,
we'll come
Midrash
back to
is
that
an
as well.
imaginative interpretation. It's not
Yeah.
intended to be anything else.
And by the
Okay.
way, if you look at footnote 2 here, tradition differs as to the number of men born circumcised. Buber Tanchuma, Noah 6 mentions 10. Um, Midrash on Psalms 9:7 lists 13. So, there's a tradition that certain individuals are kind of perfect. They were born circumcised.
Right.
Does that ever
Okay.
happen in real life, Rabbi Papi?
Um, I think it may, because if I remember the halacha, that if a child is born without a foreskin, he doesn't have to be circumcised. Although I think they still require
Wad
hakafat
Mahul,
dam.
right? You're right. That's right. I'd like to check that out. Well, I'll
Yeah,
write you.
you're the doctor. I will
Yeah,
trust
you're
your
right. You're
opinion
right.
on this
Thought that as soon as
matter.
I asked you, but I figured you might have some knowledge just to say that I don't know.
Yeah,
But I
well,
will
no,
go.
I had one rabbi who offered to teach me to be a moel, and no thanks. At that time I was still afraid of needles, didn't like blood. Gotten over that, but still not for me. Okay,
Okay.
and then finally, what you mentioned before, Moshe. Go on, Ricky.
Moshe was born circumcised, as it is said, and she saw that he was a goodly child. And Eob was born circumcised, as it is written, a tum and upright man.
Again, you have the
But
word tom.
scientifically, medically, have there been circumstances or situations where a male has been born who does not need to be circumcised?
Well, that's what Yehudi asked.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I guess so. And also, there are other cases. If a child's earlier born sons died after
Yeah,
circumcision,
hemophiliacs, the third one you don't circumcise.
right? Mhm.
Right.
It may
Yeah.
very well be that what's going on is things have gotten so bad since Cain murdered Abel that this just might be an incidental prayer that Lamech uttered when his child was born, because life has been. You ever hear people say the world is so bad? I don't know who wants to bring new children into this world. So
Yeah.
it might be that Lamech was very down and out, and this was his hope. This is what he was praying for. It doesn't
Yeah.
have to mean that he saw something special about the kid. It simply might mean, because after all, we do. I think you pointed out yourself, Rabbi Papi, in a Dvar Torah you gave several years ago, that this hope seems to be blasted when you get to the 6th verse of chapter 6. Then it turns the whole phrase around. Instead of saying Yinachamenu Masenu Mitzvon Yadenu, it says Vayinachem Hashem ki asat ha'adam ba'aretz vayit'atzev el libo. So it looks like what Lamech was praying for is exactly the opposite of what's about to happen. By the way, this isn't my own. Kasudo was the first person, to my knowledge, to notice it.
We're going to come to Kasudo because he has some important comment. I mean,
Can
a
I,
lot of
can I
comments.
ask the stupid question in the Haggadah when you talk about the 4 sons? Isn't the Tom the simple son?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. So Tom has got a wide semantic range. It can mean a lot of different things. And like I said, in regards to sacrifices, it really refers to unblemished. That's why I translated it unblemished in a few places. And so do me a favor and read, because there's more to Noach. Again, we think of Noach, okay, he's born circumcised. That's already terrific. He's a righteous person that God saves him and his family. But also the Midrash credits him with some other things. It reads footnote 3 here.
The Midrash continues to explain that after Noach's birth, the earth returned to natural growth, and moreover, but after Noach was born, he, to help humanity, invented the plow, the scythe, the hoe, and other implements for cultivating the ground.
Yeah, we know that he planted a vineyard and got drunk, But, still the Midrash sees something positive in the fact that he was the one responsible for really developing
Well, they
uh,
have
uh,
something to hang that on.
right,
After the flood, it says, "Vayachel Noach ish ha'adama
right.
vayita karem." So, I mean, if that, how did he get to be called ish
Anish
ha'adama?
Adama. And again, that ties in with Lamech's blessing
Min
on his son,
ha'adama, and then Cain was Oved Adama,
right?
who
So,
brought a curse on the Adam.
so we have already a number of post-biblical traditions, certainly midrashic traditions, of Noah being an outstanding character. This is not uncommon, as we know in midrash, that there's a lot more to the biblical characters than described in the Bible, and that continues not just in rabbinic literature, but in the pseudepigrapha. Here we have an example from Genesis Apocryphon, which is kind of weird. Um, and here they make this statement where Lamech is wondering about his child. His child is special, but could there be a reason this child is special that disturbs him? Go ahead.
And then I, Lemech, thought to myself, the pregnancy is from the watchers, and the seed is from the holy ones in the Nephilim. And my mind was greatly disturbed on account of the child.
In other words, he was worried this child wasn't his because, right after this, we have the story of the children of God taking the daughters of men, and those they gave birth to the Nephilim. The Watchers is from I don't really know a lot about the Watchers. It's
The term comes from Sefer Daniel. It's called
yeah.
Irid,
Hmm.
Ayin Yud Resh. And from there, I'm not going to say from there, Chanok is earlier than Daniel, but what I mean is that word becomes knowledgeable to us in its Hebrew version from Sefer Daniel. And
Right.
basically, Chanok is full of stories like this,
Right,
But
exactly, and
then,
we're coming to one.
you have to realize the Torah is sort of leaving an opening for such stories when
Yeah.
it says that Hanoch walked with Hashem and v'einenu ki lakachoto Elohim. When
Well, we're
you
going
tell
to
a
get to
story
that as
like
well.
that without elaboration, then you know perfectly well that you're going to be having that there were lots of other stories that for some reason the Torah does not want to elaborate on.
Yeah. And
After all, does Torah ever tell you about Terach's idol story?
yeah, right. So, I mention this every year as we're reading the genealogies, the begats that everyone used to refer to them as, and how certain people kind of stand out. Some characteristic is given of them that is not given of anyone else. Or, for example, Naamah, um,
Noach's wife.
Noach's wife. Yeah, she's not Noach's wife in the Bible, but the Midrash says, Noah must have had a wife. Who could it be? Who was around at that time? Naamah.
Or there's another reason for that. If you don't marry off Naamah to Noach, then that means Cain's entire enterprise went into the oblivion.
Mhm.
Naamah then is the one person left from the Tuval, Cain, and all those people who came up with awfully creative stuff, but they were descendants of Cain. By
Mhm.
marrying Naamah to Noach, what Chazal are getting is putting the two branches together so that we haven't lost the best parts of either one. It's not simply she's out there, let's marry her off to Noach. There's this union is a kind of union that basically ends up with benign, otherwise, what's the point of telling us about how so and so invented music and so invented if you're not going to basically have any kind of a lineage with those people and they're going to disappear, you know? So this solves that problem.
Yeah, and it fits, of course, for the Midrash, the idea that Noach is the one who develops agricultural implements, and Naamah is credited with singing. So, and also, it kind of works very nicely. Naamah and Noach.
Yeah,
Naamah is pleasant. Noach is, so
restful,
the
peaceful.
Midrash is not. I mean, you look at this and go, wait a minute here. This is how do you get this from the biblical verses? And yet there's a kind of an internal logic that is developed.
Yeah, it's like root and Naomi. The
Yeah.
same type of thing. Naomi means pleasure, and root probably because most people think it comes from friendship, right?
Mm. So also coming to Chanoch. Again, there were a number of books of Chanoch in the pseudepigrapha. The later ones were connected with Hechalot mysticism, but the earlier one, which is actually a composite work, there are like 5 sections. Um, and there's some scholars that say it's parallel to the Chumash, and one scholar says there's an Enochic Judaism, which, I don't know how much scholars really accept that, but certainly the Enoch literature, and you compare it with Jubilees and these other pseudepigraphic works, there were certain ideas that were floating around. We see in the Dead Sea Scrolls. Anyway, talking about what Yehudi said about Moshe, well, take a look at how Chanoch describes Noah.
And Noah's body was white like snow and red like a flower of a rose, and the hair of his head white like wool. And his eyes were beautiful. And when he opened his
That should be eyes.
he made the whole house bright like the sun, so that the whole house was exceptionally bright. And when he was taken from the hands of the midwife, he opened his mouth and spoke to the Lord of righteousness.
Yeah, so already, he's born and, there's light throughout the house. He's already like, if not fully formed, we know he was already circumcised. He had this pure skin and, just, great skin. I mean, he would be, a great model for a lot of different skin products. And already he had white hair, which was seen as a sign of wisdom and knowledge. Today we color our hair, but in those days, white hair was a good thing. Um, and he could even speak to God. So, and also, I have to say, this connection between Chanoch and Noah is not necessarily so unusual because if we take a look at the verses that are connected with each of them, um, go ahead.
Hanoch walked in accord with God, and when he was no more, for God had taken him.
Yeah, one of the strange verses in Torah. V'yitalech Hanoch et Elohim v'einenu. He was no more. Ki lekach oto Elohim. What does that mean? For later Enochic literature, Hanoch is taken up to heaven and he's transformed into the angel Metatron. But
The
anyway,
phrase is used in Sefer Breshit to mean a person who is born, but you can't find a body or a burial. So
yeah, that's also
later
true.
on in Parshat Miketz, Yosef Yaakov screams at the 9 remaining sons and says, you are calling me to lose my children. Otishi Kaltab, Yosef enenu v'Shimon enenu v'et Binyamin tikachu. So probably that's what Sefer Breshit thinks it means.
Yeah.
Okay, born but not necessarily dead.
Yeah, but don't let the truth get in the way of a good story. Pshat is wonderful, but boy, oh boy, what we could do with it. So, but it's interesting because not only do we have that statement made about Chanoch, but next verse, a little later on.
These are the beginnings of Noah. Noah was a righteous, wholehearted man in his generation. In accord with God did Noah walk.
Yeah, so both of them are described kind of in the same way of walking with God. Now, so I mean, it's a little bit of a connection, but it's not the only connection because the Midrash picks up on that. Shel, would you like to go on here from Pirkei de
Sure.
Rabbi Eliezer?
Adam handed on the tradition to Enoch, who was initiated in the principle of intercalation, and he intercalated the year.
Intercalated.
Interpolated, whatever it is, the year as it is said. And Enoch walked with God. Enoch walked in the ways of the calculation concerning the world which God had delivered to Adam.
Yeah,
And
now in terms of the intercalation, we're celebrating Rosh Chodesh. How we have 1 or 2 days, and we have we add an additional month. This is all the whole setting of the calendar. That was a big issue in the ancient world. It still is today to some extent, but in the ancient world, it was a big deal. And we studied some of this, that the calendar of some of the Dead Sea Scrolls, of Jubilees, of Enoch was actually a solar calendar. Whereas the calendar that we follow now in Judaism, of course, is a lunar calendar adapted to the solar calendar. So the laws of intercalating the months were very, very important. And we have, again, we studied this, the tremendous argument between uh, Rabbi, was it Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel and
Just
Yeshua?
give me a hint. Where are you? I lost you somewhere. What
Uh,
exactly are you going to?
no, just there's an
Rabban
argument.
Gamliel, Rabban
Rabban
Gamliel.
Gamliel
Rabbi
and
Gamliel, not Rabbi
yeah, yeah.
Shimon ben Gamliel. Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel had a fight with Rabbi Meir. That's at the end of Masechet Torah in the Mishnah.
Yeah, but
And
this was
Rabbi
not in
Gamliel had a
Brachot.
big fight with Rabbi Yoshua ben Chananya. That's the
Yeah,
Masechet Brachot.
over the calendar.
Over the calendar, right? If that's
Yeah.
the one you're looking for, that's the second Mishnah, the second parak of Masechet Rosh Hashanah.
So, the whole idea of the calendar is very important. Go on. So first of all, um, walking in God's ways for here, Pirkei de Rabbi Eliezer, is that Enoch learned all about the calculation of intercalation, and he delivered and he received that which been delivered by God to Adam. Go on.
And Enoch delivered the principle of intercalation to Noah.
Intercalation.
What do you call it?
Intercalation.
Intercalation to Noah, and he initiated in the principle of intercalation, and he intercalculated the year, as it is said, while the earth remain, seed time and harvest, and cold and heat, and summer and winter. Seed time refers to the
Tikufa.
Tukupha of Tishrei. Harvest refers to the Tikupha
Tikufa.
of Nisan. Cold refers to the Tikupha of Tibet. And heat refers to the Tikupha of Tammuz. Summer is in its season and winter is in its season.
Yeah, this is part of God's blessing after the floods, saying the earth will endure and will endure it with its regular seasons, and things will happen when they're supposed to happen. And uh, there were different tikufot. I mean, literally four of them, as you see here, that divided up the year, and they're connected basically with the different seasons. And so we see Enoch giving that knowledge, transmitting that knowledge to Noah. Again, a connection between Enoch and Chanoch and Noah. And apparently there's some other texts which I couldn't find, some that are questionable if they're talking about the connection, others more clear, but just the interesting element, we have Noah as already a special character, but we see
Yeah,
how his character.
it reminds me of Leonardo da Vinci. In other
Hmm,
words, he's like, what do you call a Renaissance man? Is that the term?
yeah, it's true, but and which makes sense because Noah, after all, restarts humanity.
Yeah, it would be great. I like it.
Yeah, so it's in a way the Bible, excuse me, Midrash, later Jewish tradition is trying to explain all kinds of things. First of all, going back to how does Lemech know to give Noah all of this kind of blessing? How does he know that he's going to turn out to do all these? Well, these are all the things that he did. And it still is tied into the text in that after Noah comes out of the ark, we have this promise by God. We see Noah involved in tilling the earth. So it kind of expands. It's really very nice. Now we're going to just take a look at two words that are unusual, because
I
they don't.
just ask a question before I
Oh,
continue?
sure.
So Enoch, how is he related to Noah? In other words, are they the same age? Is one older than the other?
Hanoch is definitely,
Great grandfather, I think.
yeah,
Something
great
like that.
grandfather. Yeah, because he is
Enoch is the
Lamech's.
grandfather of Noah? What
Yeah.
is it?
No,
Okay.
I think there's one in the middle. Methuselah is the grandfather of
What's that?
Noah,
I'm
Right.
and
sorry?
Yeah.
Enoch is the father of
Methuselah is the
Judah. So
son of
Enoch would be the
Hanoch.
great grandfather.
Wait, so who's older?
Well,
Enoch.
that depends
Hanoch.
because Methuselah actually survives right smack to the beginning of the plot, according to the calculation that the Torah gives. In
All
fact,
right,
the
so
Midrash
Enoch,
says that the 7 days that they had to wait to start the plot was what they were doing was sitting shiva from Methuselah.
Yeah.
so Enoch is the grandfather of Noah,
No, he's
Right.
the grandfather of Lamech.
of Lamech.
Yeah.
You want to
Here we go.
take?
I've got the
I can
text
send you
here.
one.
Yeah, I
Okay.
got the
Okay.
text here. And Hanoch lived 165 years and gave birth to Methuselah. And Noah walked with God and was no more because sorry. Uh, and God and Hanoch walked with God after he gave birth to Methuselah 300 years, and he gave birth to sons and daughters. So Hanoch is interesting because he lives 365 years, which of course is the number of days in the solar year.
Right.
Um, and it says, Vahikol Yemei Chanoch, and all the days of Chanoch were Chamesh v'shishim shana, 65 days, u'shalosh meot shana, and 300 years, so 365. Veitalech Chanoch et Elohim, and then the whole thing is he lived, he walked with God and was no more because God took him. Vahi Metushelach, and then we have Metushelach, and Metushelach gives birth to Lemech. And Lamech gives birth to Noah.
Okay. Thank you. Okay. I was just confused. Okay.
Yeah. So now go
Okay.
on. So we have, of course, Noah getting the instructions for the Teva.
Okay. So make yourself an ark of gopher wood, of reeds, make the ark, and cover it within and without with a covering of pitch.
Okay, so he is told to make a teva. I use the translation here, ark, but the Hebrew word is teva. So first of all, we have to read Ibn Ezra. What does he comment on?
The Bible uses the term ark and not ship, for it did not have the shape of a ship, nor did it have oars.
So I just took a random picture of an
Yeah.
ancient ship to kind of
Right.
give a sense of what they may have thought of when they heard the word ship.
Okay.
But you
Okay.
do realize Finana Tanakh probably does not mean ship. It means the cargo hold of the ship, where you hide the stuff that
Right.
basically is being transported, relating itself to Safun, okay, Safun,
Never thought of that.
and Safun hidden away, the Afikoman. So the word is never once used except for Yonah Yarad El Yakate Hasifina, which clearly means the cargo hold. The ship itself is called Aniyah. Now, don't get me wrong. In the Mishnah, Sfina becomes the word. Okay,
But Oniyah certainly
goes into this unity. Sorry.
Yeah, I think it's Oniyah certainly is a ship, and I think even in Yeshayahu, in his prophecy, Oniyah Sa'ora Lo Nuchama. It
You're
doesn't
kidding around.
mean,
That's Aniyah.
yeah, that's Aniyah, but I think it's a pun.
Oh, I never heard that one before.
Now,
That's
here's
terrific.
I
here's
think it's a
another
pun because it's,
Yeah.
they mention Noah in that Haftarah, so that's just
Here's another question, just
Fresh.
I thought of. So gopher wood obviously floats. Okay.
Mhm.
So how did they know that this tree is a gopher type tree, gopher wood type tree, versus another one. That's it's confusing.
That's another lesson because I
Okay.
think
But keep
gopher
in
wood.
mind, Charlie, the plant life isn't being affected by the flood.
Right.
You know, the whole flood is destroying animal life, but it's not destroying plant life.
No. I know that. No, I mean, how if they're gonna cut down a tree, how do they know that this tree is a gopher tree?
Well, the world's been in existence for 1,600 years at this point.
Okay.
If you calculate
Okay.
the
Well,
situation,
we have
paper
all.
breaks it, this
Mhm.
takes place in the year 1656, after the creation of the world.
Okay.
So, and
Okay.
presumably, given the fact that we've been told that in the antediluvian generations they invented music, they invented iron, and they invented not iron, but doing things with iron, and
Yeah.
they invented what was the other thing? So facing RVU Gov, and then
Musical instruments.
yeah, in other words, they did a lot of things in the creative class department. So I don't see why they certainly couldn't know one fruit from another. They certainly know one animal from another.
Yeah.
How else are they pairing the animals in New York? How do they
Okay.
decide which animals are tame and not tame?
Yeah, that's a good explanation. That's fine. No problem. Okay.
And now,
Should I
okay, so
continue?
Ibn Ezra points out the word they use the word teva, which is a unique word, because we're not talking about a normal ship. And a barbanel follows that. Here's a
Uh,
barbanel. This is my
well,
translation, so I'm not going to guarantee it's great.
Now God commanded him in the construction of a tivah, not a ship, not a boat, because it was not in the form of a ship with a mast and banner and oars, but in the form of a box. It was not square, but triangular with a pointy head, so that it would not be overturned by the water or the wind. Because every object has four purposes: active, material, form, and purpose. He explained the four of them in the matter of the Tiva.
Yeah, I would not say that that is a great translation. I'm just
No,
doing my best to translate a barbanel.
yeah.
Because he's aval kidmut teva, which in modern Hebrew is a box. Tevat doar, mailbox. But he says, velo aitam meruba'at. It was not square. Aval haitak dmut mishulash. It was like in the form of a triangle. I'm thinking more like a pyramid. I don't know how he thought that would be floating more safely than a box, but but the point is that both Barbanel and uh, Ibn Ezra are noticing that this is not a usual ship. That's why we're using this word teva, which is kind of unique. As we'll see, it really is unique. And here we come to Moshe David Cassuto, a great Italian commentator. Actually, he taught at Hebrew U.
Huh.
He went to Aliyah in 1939. He was a very important rabbi in Italy, but he saw what was coming down the road in 1939, and he went to Aliyah.
Yeah, Cassuto was a great scholar, and he also, I mean, the family was very important in Italy.
Okay, the term Teva appears in the scripture only in two passages, here and in the passage on the birth and rescue of Moshe. This is certainly not by accident. Through the parallel word, the Torah apparently wanted to highlight the parallel in content. Both here and there is the salvation from death in the waters of the one who is fitting to be saved and in the future will come to save others. Here is the salvation of humanity. There is the salvation of the chosen people. Here is the salvation of the microcosm.
No, the macrocosm.
What? Macrocosm.
Yeah, because this is Noah.
Yeah, right. There is the salvation of the microcosm.
Yeah, I don't have his English translation. He did a commentary on Bereshit and on Shmot, and I only have them in Hebrew. I actually don't have them here. They're in the office, so I did my best at translating. And he goes on from there.
The actions of the fathers are a sign of the there it is, of the sons. Therefore, there are similar expressions in both passages. Here it is written, make yourself an ark of gopher wood and cover it within and without with a covering of pitch. And there it is written, she took for him a little ark of papyrus. She loamed it with loam and with pitch. The difference in materials depends on the different places and their customs, and in the distinction of the saved individuals. There it is an infant, and here it is an entire family of people, and with it a large number of animals. Here it is written, make yourself, because certainly a sufficiently large ark would not be readily available.
In other words,
However,
make for yourself.
make
You've got to
for
make.
yourself. Yes. No, it says make yourself.
Yeah.
Okay, because certainly a sufficiently large ark would not be readily available. However, it is written, she took for herself because small tivot of
Tevot.
reeds would certainly be readily available in Egypt. Nonetheless, the essence is the same both here and there, tiva, and the parallel is clear.
Yeah, so it's a unique word
Mm.
that appears rarely in Tanakh, and Dafka in two stories, and I think Kasuda does the great job of pointing out, what the Bible is trying to convey. And that is followed by Dr. Sarna.
The vessel significantly is called tiva. This key word recurs 7 times here in the instructions for building the ark, and 7 times again in connection with the subsidence of the waters. Yet tiva in the
Teva.
sense,
Teva is the Hebrew, Teva.
yet teva in the sense of an ark appears again in the Bible only in connection with the salvation of the baby Moses in Exodus. The term suggests a box-like craft made to float on the water, but without a rudder or sail or any other navigational aid. It does not use the services of a crew. The use of teva is intended to emphasize that the fate of the occupants is to be determined solely by the will of God and not to be attributed to the skill of man. By contrast, the hero of the Mesopotamian stories builds a regular ship and employs boatmen to navigate it.
Of course, our story of the flood is part of a series, not series, but a group of flood stories from Mesopotamia, which makes sense because Mesopotamia, is between the Tigris and the Euphrates, and they know from floods. But here, Sarna adds a little bit else here that, that this is all the use of the word teva is demonstrating that it is God behind all of it, not human beings.
Right, right.
Okay, so just an interesting element.
Yeah,
We talk about Noah's Ark,
yeah.
but it's not just an ark. Why ark? And now there's an element of the ark that is rather confusing or unknown. Go on.
A skylight you are to make for the ark and finish it to a cubit upward. The entrance of the ark you are to set in its side with a lower, a second, and a third deck. You are to make it.
Yeah, and it says here a skylight, but the Hebrew word is tzohar. Tzohar ta'asela teva. Now there are different explanations of what is this tzohar. First of
Interesting.
all, Rashi.
Yeah, they had glass back then. No, just kidding. Sohar, there are those who say it is a window, and there are those who say it is a precious stone that's shown for them. Oh,
Yeah.
interesting. Okay.
No, it's something that clearly, because from the word "soar" meaning brightness, it's referring to light in some way. Hence the word skylight,
Yeah.
which is certainly reasonable. But for the rabbis, yes, maybe it was a skylight, or maybe it was one of those stick-on lights that you get at IKEA or whatever. You can just stick it up there.
Rabbi
Yeah.
Popsy, as a
Yeah.
pulpit rabbi, I would like to ask you a question about Teva. we tend to use the term ark for the place where we put the Sifrei Torah. At least in English, that word is often used that way. The ark of the scrolls. Is that something that was intended? The word in English came as a result of a similarity in Noah's Ark, because in the rabbinic literature, Teva does mean where the scrolls are kept. And we today, even in Israel, would use that term.
Yeah, I think that there is a development from the fact that the Teva is a box-like structure.
Right.
So I think that Teva, becomes in later like I said, modern Hebrew, Teva is a box.
I mean,
also,
so I think that that evolved, and as well, perhaps the English, ark was something that contained something, something
let's work
holy,
on
if
that.
you
I already
will.
took care of the circumcision thing, but that's what we didn't exercise.
Yeah, but this I don't really know how they developed, because certainly in Hebrew, we still say Aron HaKodesh. Maybe they wanted something nicer than closet.
Our term Aron HaKodesh is not a term that's used in rabbinic times. When the Mishnah describes Tefillah, they don't use the word Aron at all.
Right.
I mean,
they probably didn't necessarily have an Aron. They, would wheel it out. So
I'm saying, in the Tanakh, Aron either means the place where the Ten Commandments are, or the place where the body is, the body of Yosef.
Right.
He said Aron Mitzrayim. But I was more interested right now in the word Teva and how the similarity of the word ark. But okay, I'll work on that.
Yeah, I'm not sure of the derivation. I mean, I'm aware that we use it in all these different ways, but I'm not sure how that came to be.
But our ark in Or Hadash is perfect because of the stained glass windows, which acts as a skylight.
Yeah, true.
The Sohar. That's very good.
Yeah, we've got very good. Thank you. We are Sohar in the back.
Yeah.
Excellent.
Okay, now Ibn Ezra.
So Sohar means an opening through which light would enter. It comes from the same root as Soharayim, noon.
Soharayim, modern Hebrew.
Yeah.
As well.
The opening was made in the usual place on top. Scripture tells us that the top of the ark was a cubit in length. We gather from this that it was a sixth of a cubit wide. The ark was triangular in shape. The top came to a point, and so did its corners. Therefore, it did not overturn.
Yeah, we saw that before.
The door was on one side and was reached by climbing a ladder. Now we know that the ark was very large. Furthermore, it's possible that Noah was much taller than we, for the cubits mentioned in regard to the ark are Noah's cubits. It is also possible that the ark was divided into 3 stories, that the bottom story was 10 cubits high. Some say the ark had many stories, and the scripture abridged the number.
Yeah, trying to recreate something that we don't have. And one of the things that's interesting is that for all of the instructions for building the Teva, we don't have a description of what it looked like.
Yeah.
It's kind of the same way with the Mishkan. We have a tremendous description of the Mishkan, but we don't have an actual description of what it looked like. And later as well for the Beit HaMikdash. We have a description of Solomon building the Beit HaMikdash, but we don't know what it looks like. And even, the Beit HaMikdash in the Degem Bayit Sheni, in the model of Second Temple Jerusalem, now located at the
Holy Land Hotel.
No longer. It's at the Israel Museum.
Where they moved it to?
Yeah, they moved it to the Israel Museum. And the model is not, I mean, on one hand, it's based on the rabbinic descriptions, but they took a model from another Roman temple elsewhere in the ancient world to kind of let's just finish up. I mean, Casuto has a lot to say on what gives a number of different interpretations, but let's just finish up because getting to the end with what Sparna has to say.
An opening for daylight. Hebrew tzohar is another unique word. It is either the window of, or means a roof. Depending upon which meaning is adopted, the unclear directive to terminate it within a cubit of the top could variously mean that a space of 1 cubit is to be left between the top of the window and the roof, and the window itself is to be a cubit in height, or that the slanting roof would project 1 cubit beyond the side of the ark.
Yeah. So again, pointing out that we have this description, which seems to be detailed, but we're not necessarily sure of what those details are.
Yeah, I just wanted to add, it's also interesting that Noah had to construct this ark. So number one, it wouldn't tip in the floods, but when the floods dissipated, it would land, it would settle right side up so
Yeah.
everybody could get out again,
Yeah.
including animals. Okay.
Yeah. So, it is still, a remarkable story.
Yeah. Yeah.
And, and we've talked about in the past how we probably have a couple of traditions that are woven, not probably, we have a couple of traditions that are woven together. The scholars would say it's J and P, but it's still just such a captivating story.
Yeah.
On one hand, it's drawing from the ancient Near Eastern materials. On the other hand, of course, it adds its own unique twists, the most obvious of which is the moral dimension that Noah is chosen because he is a righteous person. And we also have
Righteous
a sense.
people bring light into the world.
Mm-hmm.
Remember, there are 3 words for window in this parsha. One is chalon, one is sohar, and then we have arubot hashamayim.
Right.
That's a standard chidon question.
That's good. That's right. And also, the sense of last week when we studied the different stories of creation, and we talked about the midrash of God making and destroying worlds until he came up with this one. To some extent, that's Parashat Bereshit and Parashat Noach. God creates the world, separates the waters, and then God is upset with what he made, or how the world turned out, and he undoes it all and starts the world anew. So Noah, and Noah, of course, all the biblical characters, not all, but most of the biblical characters are very interesting. I mean, Noah here is a completely righteous man, and he. But again, when we compare him to Avram, there are all kinds of things that Avram did to demonstrate his righteousness that Noah doesn't seem to do. Although the Midrash, I didn't include that one, but there's a famous Midrash, or why did he have to build the ark? Um, because it took a long time, and this way people would ask him, "What are you doing?" And he would explain it, and hopefully encourage them to engage in teshuvah, in repentance. Of course, Noah's Ark has inspired all kinds of children's toys, all kinds of artwork, and a great musical, Two by Two, which one of the funniest songs was, you've got to have a rudder on the ark, or Noah is arguing with his sons, who want the rudder on the ark. And Noah says, but why do we need a God promised that we would survive? So why do we need a rudder? And his son answers, I don't know, Papa. Why do we need a boat? Which, by the way, is a question that they ask in the Midrash.
Yeah.
Couldn't God just have saved them without the Teva?
Yeah.
So, it's a great story, and also interesting to see how later Jewish tradition tries to answer certain questions that come from the text. And even if they are going far from the pshat, they're not totally unconnected to the text and other issues in the text. So, just thought we'd look at something a little bit different on Parashat Noach.
And with a little bit of humor, it gets you back to Dick Gregory's Al Tikrali Shachor, Don't Call Me Black. And he talks about Noah, build an ark. Yeah, what about it? Noah, how long can you tread water?
Right. Yeah. When
I
Bill tells
found
me he was
out
funny, and before we knew
source
he was
of
a creep.
the word ark is a Latin word that means box or chest, and it went from there into Middle English, and it became a coffer, chest, box, and obviously this must have been a choice on the part of the committee that did the King James, and that just basically came down to us that way. And you know, I will be very interested to see how they say Noah's Ark in French and other European languages. Be something to look into, you know. But that's another project. At least we've got this one settled.
So Toda Rabah, everyone.
Calling the Torah scrolls that we put now into an ark is our own idea. In other words, this is an inner Jewish thing, Joe. Okay, we decided that was appropriate because the original 10 Commandments were in our own. Is no, that was our own development, our own. Like for example, when remember the Reform movement decided to call all their synagogues temples, and even our school here, which wasn't Reform, the White Meadow was called the temple. Okay,
I grew up at Temple Israel.
The synagogue is now the temple. You know. That was the Reform movement. Well, listen, Rabbi Zucker's the one to tell us. He's a graduate of their institution, their flagship institution.
I'll do just a funny story on that. When I was in Kansas City, I was very close with the assistant rabbi at the large Reform synagogue, and we would sit together in meetings, and we'd hear them talk about the synagogues and the temples. And the two of us were like, just say synagogue. What else do you need? So we would, sometimes these were not the most exciting meetings in the world. And we would just kind of like count how many times they had to make sure to say synagogues and temples. And her synagogue actually was called the Temple B'nai Yehuda.
Interesting.
All right. Shabbat Shalom, everyone.
Shabbat
Take care.
Shalom, everybody.
Kol hakavod. Kol tuv.